welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. Hopefully you guys are doing well. I wanted to take a look at Saturn's upcoming transit to the sign of Pisces, kind of doubling down with some of these Pisces videos this week. Hopefully most of you guys already saw that new moon in Pisces. If you didn't check it out, it's going to help you set intentions for this transit. And do me a favor, before we even get into today's discussion, please make sure you click the button below. Make sure you are subscribed to my channel. That way you're alerted as to when I have new content coming out. I'm going to keep putting videos out about all of these outer planet transits. And this is the first of what might be a number of videos with Saturn in Pisces. To all of you guys who are members and also subscribers, thanks for joining me. And if you're new, welcome. I'm a Western astrologer. I focus on working both with tropical astrology transits as well as working with the Sabian symbols. It's a mouthful. And tarot to better understand what's going on in the cosmos. Guys, we have so many significant outer planet transits that are taking place in the month of March. March through May is going to be very action-packed. But I wanted to really focus on some of the archetypal themes that we're going to see with Saturn going through Pisces. Like I said, this is going to be more reflecting on what that might be coming up for us as a collective. Towards the end of the video, I will touch on where it's going to be affecting each and every one of the 12 signs. Equally, I will be talking about this in my March horoscope, so just hang tight. We're going to have those the third week of February. You guys will get those pretty soon. And I'm also in the midst of trying to put together like a Saturn in Pisces boot camp. So if you're somebody who is a natal Saturn in Pisces and you're going to be having your second Saturn return or your first Saturn return, super, super important to know what's going on. I will be putting that out in the month of March. So you guys will be able to pick that up on my website, where I'm going to take you guys through Saturn through each and every one of the houses, talk about how it might play out and some of the most prominent aspects that are going to be going on throughout this transit over the next 2.5 years, how to navigate it, what you might expect, just as like a little cosmic roadmap for you guys. So let's take a look at when this transit first begins. That's going to start on March 7th, 2023, okay? Now, Saturn will stay in the sign of Pisces until February 13th, 2026. And as most of you guys know, when you get transit readings with me or I'm talking about what's going on, I'm always a couple steps ahead, right? So I want you guys to think about, as this Saturn in Pisces transit is beginning, how it's going to end. And for many of us, it's going to feel like this like very kind of like dramatic completion of something, because several years down the road, when Saturn completes its transit through the sign of Pisces, it's going to ingress into the very first degree of the zodiac, 0 degrees of Aries. So we're completing a cycle. And we're also going to see Saturn ingress and make a conjunction with Neptune at 0 degrees of Aries. So this is like the grand finale, right? The Saturn transit, the grand finale. Throughout this transit, we will see Saturn stay even in the midst of its retrograde this year in this sign. So Saturn will not retrograde back into Aquarius. So if you're an Aquarius, Sun, Moon, or Rising, or if you're a fixed sign, give yourself a big pat on the back next month. You have graduated. It has been real having Saturn in Aquarius. And I'm looking forward to how this transit actually manifests, because the energy is very different than fixed air, okay? And we're also not going to see all of the wonky kind of squares to Uranus. Actually, Saturn is going to start kind of making some friendly aspects both to the North Node in Taurus, helping us build towards the future. It's also going to start making some sextiles to Uranus and helping us really kind of create or envision the life that we want. And if we use this appropriately, find the faith and also be working on things behind the scenes, right? So in general, 0 to 7 degrees of Pisces, which is what we will be seeing all of this year, it'll only get up to 7 before it starts its retrograde, is going to represent the first decan of Pisces, which is ruled by Neptune, okay? So traditionally, Pisces is ruled by Jupiter. The modern day ruler is Neptune. I can see where both apply, but I think that it's going to be pretty strong Neptunian energy as we see it hanging out within the first 7 degrees. What does this represent? What does this mean, right? So the first 7 degrees is going to be limitations, boundaries. So pull out your chart, take a look, see where Pisces is in your chart. You can use whole sign or Placidus. If you use whole sign, it's going to be the whole sign of Pisces. If you use Placidus, you want to look at where the first 0 to 7 degrees, that's where Saturn's going to hang out. If this sounds like Latin to you, check out a birth chart calculator online. They're free. You just got to put in your time, date, city of birth, and you want to cast that chart. Use either Placidus or whole sign. And once again, I'm a Western astrologer, and see where 0 to 4 degrees lands. When I like to talk about Pisces, I always like to use this example. It's really helpful because this is one of the situations where the actual symbols that reflect this archetype really does apply. So I have spent the last like 14, 15 years of my life living in LA. Something that I loved doing was like going up to Pasadena and seeing some of the gardens. I used to love going to like the Huntington Library and various other places. And something that I would always observe is whenever I saw like fish ponds or fountains or koi ponds, without fail, you're always going to find like a little kid that's sticking their hand in the water and disrupting the water, throwing a rock into the pond. And then you kind of watch the fish scurry. That is how Pisces energy works, okay? It's a water element, so it is intuitive, sensitive, receptive, feminine in its nature. But being that it is a mutable sign, it is changeable, right? So sometimes the fish are coming in and they want to be friendly and they're peaceful, and sometimes they get kind of scared away and they're going to scurry off to their lily pads or wherever they hang out, if they're hanging out in a sea anemone, whatever. So there is this changeable energy to Pisces that does kind of retreat. And it can be retreating for protection, retreating for conscious reflection, for meditation, but it can also be for healing, or it can be deceptive. So this can be a little bit of a tricky energy working with Pisces. Now Saturn, right? We see Saturn change signs every 2.5 years. So now it's wrapping up, having spent 2.5 years in its home, one of its home signs, Aquarius, where it's been fixed air. So it's been about intellect, information, limitation, separation. And now it's going to move into a water sign. So one of the big things that I always tell people is that when Saturn goes into a water sign, it's going to be dealing with emotions, okay? Pisces or 12th house energy also has this feeling of completion because it represents the last sign of the zodiac. So we're completing a phase really since the last time that we had Saturn go through this part of the skies, which was in the early to kind of mid 90s. I'll go through all the time periods for you guys, don't worry. And so just thinking about this, Saturn, right, it represents boundaries, limitations, foundations, top-down structures, throwing it into a changeable water sign. So there seems to suggest that we're having to reevaluate our emotional boundaries. We're reevaluating limitations also when it comes to deception, when it comes to what's hidden, when it comes to the subconscious, the spiritual world, but also hidden spaces, okay? So prisons, hospitals, mental health centers. Neptune being connected to the sign also does talk about pharmaceuticals, drugs, dependency, and also mental health. So these are going to be some things that we're going to see over the next year. Pisces, right? This is a sign where we see Venus's exaltation. So we see the super romantic, self-sacrificial, very Mother Teresa, beautiful music, beautiful temples and fountains connecting to worshiping Venus. But this is also going to be in the fall of Mercury. So you guys know that Mercury really likes to hang out in Gemini or in Virgo, but it's in its fall in this sign. So this might suggest that we're going to see issues potentially with memory, right? Issues with communicating our emotions, communicating in general. There can be some confusion here. We may also see with Saturn moving into this sign that there's going to be lessons in regards to karmic relationships, hidden secrets, hidden financial dealings, right? Because of Venus's connection to the exaltation. But the big theme, and this is quite literal, is going to be limitations or boundaries, especially in regards to mental health, prisons, hospitals, charities, oil, gasoline, and water, right? Don't forget that Neptune is going to preside over the oceans, but also some of these hot topics like gas and oil, right? And our need to use these materials. Now that's going to be a hot topic of debate, primarily because of Pluto moving into Aquarius. I think we're going to hear more about what's going on with just the health of the planet and where we need to make sacrifices and cutbacks. Certainly Saturn can kind of throw a monkey wrench into situations and kind of put a damper on whatever house that it's in. So we may see that there's a limitation of some of these particular materials that we're using. There may also be more government involvement or intervening or responsibility with some of these topics as well. Now, generally speaking, right, when we see Saturn in this sign, it can bring about sadness or annoyance, depression, disappointment. It is true, it's very possible, especially when we're dealing within the first 10 degrees, we're working through some of these limitations, or perhaps maybe we're becoming more aware of it, because Saturn moving into Pisces, or if you have a natal Saturn-Neptune conjunction, it's about making the spiritual or making the emotional or making the invisible real, right? That's at least how I see it. So what we might be finding is that with this transit, you know, we are trying to become more spiritually grounded in our meditation, trying to become more spiritually grounded in our life. We are focusing more also on our imagination, on our fantasies, and trying to kind of make them more so real. Now, you might find that there is some pros and cons to this, right? There can be a sense of us needing to be more practical and not being so idealistic, that we need to kind of ground our intentions in our day-to-day life in reality, so we're not getting lost in this energy. Staying tethered, staying grounded, and for some people, staying sober or rational-minded is definitely going to be a challenge. When I look at the transits and how this is going to be playing out, like I said, you know, maybe this is just me zooming out and looking at the bigger picture, but I know that in 2024, we're going to begin to start seeing eclipses that are going to be taking place in Pisces as well as Virgo. Then in January of 2025, the North Node is going to move into Pisces. And in a few years' time, like I said, Saturn and Neptune are going to be meeting around that 29-degree critical point of 29 of Pisces. And that is the last degree of the zodiac. That's when it's just like, oh my goodness, everything feels like it's melting, or we're just having to let go, we're having to release, we're having to trust the process, or we're needing to become more aware of where we are sabotaging something, or where we're almost blinded to what's really going on out in the world. Now, both of these planets will ingress into 0 degrees Aries around the same time. This will be right around February 20th, 2026. Now, Saturn and Neptune will both go in and out of these degrees, and they're going to sit on that fixed star at 29 degrees Shiat, which will bring some challenging things, not just completions, but we will see more issues in regards to drowning, more issues in regards to mental health, suicide, drug overdoses, issues with addiction, kidnapping, people going missing. I mean, it's a really rocky degree. And my interpretation of this is where we are not collectively aware of what's going on behind the scenes. We may also not be aware of some of the spiritual implications of some of our mental or even like substance abuse issues. And where many of us are just feeling like the rug has been kind of pulled over our eyes. And I'm anticipating that when this transit happens, it's going to trigger a new cycle. And I think collectively we're going to be moving forward and potentially returning back to some primitive ways of worship, right? Saturn and Neptune can be boundaries in regards to religion. It can be talking about going back to worshiping deities, worshiping elements. I'm really curious to see if this is a movement to go back also to traditional ways of worship and working with the elements, and if like paganism like makes a comeback, right? Maybe I'm just idealistic. But for some, I think it'll be challenging, as this new cycle that's going to be emerging with Saturn in a detrimental sign is going to be like, okay, now it's really done. We're really done here, right? Especially when we're dealing with outer planets, Pluto, Neptune, you know, Uranus, Saturn. These all talk about changes that are going on collectively. So we're going to see a lot of action in Pisces right off the bat. March 7th, we see Saturn, Mercury, the Sun, and Neptune all hanging out in Pisces. So it's a Pisces party. And it's a little wonky because we're also going to be feeling that it is all short of that Jupiter and Aries energy, right? Jupiter is also the traditional ruler of Pisces. So to see Jupiter in a sign that's like, let's go, and we see all this Pisces energy that's a little, I don't know if I want to come out of the coral. I don't know if I want to get out of bed. I don't know if I want to really see what's going on in the world. I'm scared, or I'm not sure about the future. It's a little bit of like, you know, 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And we may feel like that a little bit throughout the transit. It's fascinating to me that it happens on a full moon. So we're going to have a full moon that's going to be in Virgo, which is very grounded and very practical. And when we look at the axis of Virgo and Pisces, it's really highlighting our physical health, our habits, our routines, our bodies, and the physical affecting the metaphysical or the spiritual or the invisible or the psychological, the emotional, right? And it'll be a full moon with Mercury conjunct Saturn. So likely what we're going to be hearing or finding out round about the time that this transit starts right off the bat is health-related issues, issues in other countries, issues also with mental health, issues with addiction, and where we're tackling that. I think the positive side of Saturn going into Pisces is that we're going to get a stronger hold and understanding and firm footing in some of these areas. But likely, as Saturn is like inching up towards its conjunction to Neptune, there is going to be this want or this need to suppress. So they're going to want to suppress things. They're going to want to suppress people meeting and being able to practice their faith, I anticipate. They're going to want to suppress people knowing what's going on in regards to the business of prisons and the government involvement in that and the money that's being made. They're possibly even going to want to be repressing the truth about what's been going on with pharmaceuticals. And also we're going to hear more about opiate crisis. I think we're going to hear a lot more also about where governments are really getting involved and talking to the masses, especially those who are homeless or are dealing with depression or addiction, and this incentive to be offering people a way out and talking to them about assisted suicide. So obviously lots of trigger warnings in this video. I'm just telling you guys this now, just reading the astrology. I know these can be some really sensitive topics, especially for people who deal with some of these issues. So kind of taking a look back in time to the most recent Saturn cycles, right? So if we go back in time, the last time we saw Saturn moving through this part of our skies, it was from June of 1993 through April of 1996. I remember bits and pieces of this period. But probably the biggest thing when I reflect on that was just, I think probably like a real significant archetype for that, in my generation, was like Kurt Cobain, everything that was going on with the grunge movement, music and like rock and roll, and how music videos were becoming like really prominent on TV, and like MTV and VH1 was like a big thing. I think about also just anything in regards to drugs and pharmaceutical stuff. And we might have had a whole period of time where generations of people were coming in and they were starting to really utilize antidepressants or other medications that might have impacted or affected their mental health. If we go back a little bit further and we look at 29 years prior, we had Saturn going through Pisces from March of 1964 through 1967. Now, I wasn't alive, but obviously we have an idea of what was kind of going on in the world at that time, especially this push or this incentive for focusing on peace. And I think that we don't realize that enough about Saturn and Pisces, that it can push or incentivize us to have peace negotiations or peace talks or to make peace possible. But we also might see this dissolving aspect of globalism. And I think that that's happening outside of even the Saturn and Pisces transit. I think we're going to see a globalism dissolving. We might see much more of a push for people to be more focused on nationalism. We might see a lot more people that are also very focused on practicing in private, governing in private, talking about things in private and not really making it super public. Pisces also deals with like film, it can deal with actors and actresses and art and anything in regards to kind of fantasy worlds, spiritual worlds. We'll see more of that stuff playing out, I think, towards the end of the latter part of the Saturn and Pisces transit in this particular run. Like I said, keep in mind it's going to be here until about this time, February of 2026. So we're going to have 3 whole years of dealing with this energy. But when I go through time periods, and this is very brief, but when I go through time periods and I look at throughout history some really significant trends that happened while Saturn was in Pisces, if I go back in time, I think back to right around 594 BCE. This is when Athens was experiencing major economic crisis and discontent. It's a very similar pattern. This is when they had Saturn and Neptune that were coming into conjunction in the same degrees, and then both of these planets were ingressing into Aries. And so they saw lots of the undoing happen while it was in Pisces. And then as Saturn and Neptune were ingressing into Aries, solutions were found by introducing constitutional, economic, and moral reforms, ultimately laying the foundation for the future of their democracy. Okay, so kind of similar to what might be happening here in the world. We move forward quite a bit, but this is something that's going to be more recognized by most of us. I think it's 1549. It's either 1549, 1449, 1496. Hello. We had the Black Death. Okay, so Saturn has connections to illness in the sign of Pisces. We do see issues with infections. We do see issues with plagues. But we had the Black Death in 1449 to 1496. And this was birthing the plague, but also ultimately the Renaissance. This was a period of time where Da Vinci was like working hard behind the scenes. There were various plagues that went throughout Europe, one of which was in particular spread by French troops during their invasion of Italy in 1494. And we saw a whole slew of different epidemics that happened after that. 1729 to 1732, we saw a ton of religious change and religious reform. So that's something else that you're going to see because Pisces has connections to temples, spiritual centers, churches, anything in regards to meeting and being able to worship. At this point in time, we saw tons of religious change, including the spread of Freemasonry throughout Europe and America. We also saw a rise of Christian revivalists and evangelicals as well. 1788 to 1791, we had the French Revolution, which was particularly brutal. It was right on the back of the U.S. Revolution. And this led to a complete reorganization and breakdown, major civil disorder, obviously, over in France, but also kind of purging and clearing the way for a new beginning. In the midst of that, we also had, Beethoven, Mozart, and William Blake, who were all creating really prominent pieces of art and literature that would, be listened to and read to this day. 1870 to 1820, we had the Industrial Revolution, the abolishment of slavery, new ideas about democracy, and also economics were emerging. People were starting to think differently and look at freedom and civil liberties very, very differently in the world. 1846 to 1849, we had the Opium Wars that were going on between China and Britain. Quite textbook with Neptune having that connection to Saturn and there being some kind of conflict in terms of boundaries and limitations and controlling certain land. We had the Great Famine and Starvation that was taking place in Ireland, and there was a large amount of, a great deal of death. We had the California Gold Rush. The Communist Manifesto was published by Marx, and the very first women's rights convention was held in New York City. And finally, 1905 to 1908, the U.S. Pure Food and Drug Act was passed, essentially protecting people from poison in products and requiring ingredient disclosure to be labeled on things. And also, Einstein published his theory of special relativity. Okay, so talking about anything in regards to quantum stuff, physics, other dimensions, gravity, how space, and all these time configurations work. So there's also very, very, very Pisces. You would think that that's Neptune, you think that that's Uranus, but it's actually more so connected to Pisces because Pisces talks about invisible worlds, what's beyond us, things that we can't see, how that stuff works. So I'm curious to see how this plays out for us. Obviously, like I said, the first 10 degrees that we're going to deal with throughout this next year is definitely going to be more about limitations. And I think it's about getting to have a bit of a feel or a vibe for Saturn and Pisces. So you might want to reflect back on whether that was in the early to mid 90s or if that was in the 60s. If you're a little bit better seasoned than some of us that are watching, maybe you've been through this transit personally. Maybe you have Saturn and Pisces personally. But for those of you guys who are wondering who this is going to affect the most, this is going to be affecting obviously Pisces, Sun, Moon, and Rising or personal placements, followed by Capricorn and Aquarius risings because Saturn is your guys' chart ruler. Now, if you have any placements between 0 to 8 degrees of Pisces or mutable signs, this is going to affect you the most. And especially if you were born with a natal Saturn in Pisces, you're gearing up for your Saturn return. It could be your first, second, or your third. Now, for those of you guys who are wondering, just the bottom line themes to just watch for, and I think these are ways that Saturn is going to start to kind of show himself throughout the next couple of months. Number one for me, I think, is going to be disassociation, which I think is really important. I think because Saturn talks about our limits and our disconnection, and Pisces is much more about our emotional side, our sensitive side. I think we're going to be dealing with disassociation, and also where some of us have completely become desensitized to what's going on in the world, and how to handle it, right? So we've got mass numbers of people who have spent several years kind of inside, not socializing, not connecting to people, and it may be more challenging to get out and about and feel safe in the world, to feel like you can connect with people, to pay attention. I think it's also going to bring up where some of us are really starting to deal with the aftermath now of not having that connection, not having human connection, which is so ironic considering Saturn in Pisces is going to want more separation, right? It's going to make it more challenging for us to emotionally connect and express our feelings. But it may bring this to our awareness that we have slews of people and even children who are lacking the necessary social skills to be able to feel safe or connected to one another. So it might bring us more to our attention. I think of like therapy and spiritual healing. I think of like retreat centers and meditation centers and ashrams and places that we can go consciously to disconnect. And I think that that's going to be the positive of this is perhaps Saturn in Aquarius prepared us for having more limitation and in disconnecting, socially. And now it's going to be, what are you going to do with this energy? If there is going to be a period of time where we're still not quite getting into what is normal, I don't think that we're going back to a normal. I think this is the new normal. How are we adjusting to this spiritually and also emotionally? And how are we making the most of this time where we're by ourselves and consciously deciding, I'm going to meditate, or I'm going to, go on a retreat, or I'm going to go camp in nature, or I'm going to go and do some journeying or some shamanic work, or learn more about reflection and being able to better connect with your higher self. Where will we see, I think, innovations also potentially in hypnosis, past life regression, and possibly exploring other methods of being able to better treat mental health disorders. Just reflecting on the last year, finding out all of these studies that are coming out that potentially some of the makeup in antidepressant drugs really aren't helping us. It's not helping us when it comes to what is being released in our brains. Which leads me to number 2, and I think that this is going to be reviewing or creating new laws or limits or getting more involved with this issue in regards to reliance on pharmaceuticals, right? So I think about opiates, how the opiate issues have been raging for years, and now potentially, hopefully, we're finally going to start doing something about it. I think of individuals who are having issues with anxiety or ADD and not being able to function. And I have hopes that there is going to be new research and information that's emerging about how the emotional body works and a little bit where spirit meets science, and that there can be some real groundwork that's laid for proof that vibration is real, that we have this auric field, that we're absorbing things, that we're feeding off of one another, that vibes are very much a real thing. I think there's going to be more exploration of the sea, and I think that's going to be a big thing with ocean and ocean preservation and learning more about the depths of the sea. Saturn can be actual physical structures and things that are very old and ancient. So I keep holding space for, perhaps there's going to be, temples, or there's going to be stones, or there's going to be like monuments and things that are uncovered within the ocean that may potentially lead back to ancient civilization and give us more clarity in regards to our origins and helping us reconnect with the spiritual side of ourselves and realize that there is this divine connection that we have to the earth, but also to ancient traditions. I think more about care and recovery. That seems to be another theme. It's like, how are we taking care of our physical and our mental health? Where does physical really affect the mental? Where have we perhaps become too reliant on pharmaceuticals and too reliant on shots and pills and injections Where does the government step in, at least here in the United States, and get more involved with limiting how many commercials are going to be put on the television promoting drugs? I don't have cable. I have not had cable for years. When I was living in LA about 3 or 4 years ago, I had gone about 4 years without cable. And now I'm living and I still don't have cable. But the few times that I am watching television, usually it's when I'm watching football or sports, every commercial that I see is either fast food or it's connected to pushing a product. And I think it's extremely bizarre, at least living here in this country, that there is this kind of mentality that's just like, yeah, here's this thing, it could fix your problem. Go ask your doctor for this medication. And also I'm wondering if there's going to be more intervention and if there's going to be actual governing boards paying more attention to lobbying involving pharmaceutical companies and also investments and how much of our tax dollars are going into some of these incentives. I think we're going to start questioning more about what is and is not real, making the unreal real, right? So that might actually be what Saturn does. And this is, whether this is through screens and artificial reality, other worlds. I think that we're going to see obviously major innovations in anything that's augmented reality, whether it's headsets or it's going to be new applications or it's going to be new ways that we're going to be learning or that we're going to be exploring. Screens is very Pisces, right? So anything that you are watching and where there's going to potentially be limitations in regards to what you have access to, what you can watch, what you can potentially learn, what you can share with others, and where certain groups are going to have to kind of go behind the scenes. I always laugh that, throughout history, astrology has had to do this intermittently. We're used to being, kind of like cast out of society and having to go into the underground. And what might that look like if you guys can't watch YouTube videos, right? If you can't get information about what's going on in the skies? Are you meeting with private groups? Are you a part of an email chain, right? Are you meeting weekly and maybe you can't see people, but you know that you're meditating at the same time as 200 other people with the intention of being able to connect and raise the vibration of what's going on in this planet? Some may have a really difficult time with the reality and choose to opt out of paying attention and just decide that they're going to get further sucked into screens, playing video games, watching movies, and using that as a method for escaping. And that's definitely something that can come up with Pisces energy of just wanting to get away from it all, wanting to hide out, not wanting to address the elephant in the room, or not being able to see clearly. I think screen addiction might be a thing. I also think that what we're going to be learning more about, hopefully, is the effects that it's having, especially on younger people, how that constant serotonin boost that we're getting by focusing on likes and being able to, go back and forth with people and have that immediate gratification is making it much more challenging to connect in person. And I think one of the big things also is going to be about cultivating faith, forging your own spiritual path, even if that means that you're going at it alone. Maybe it's going to incentivize some people to get back into church, to get back into their spiritual practice, to get back into a devotional practice. And some people may be experiencing that as being a challenge, right? I think we saw a little bit of this with Saturn and Pluto and Jupiter when they were all in Capricorn back in 2020. We saw some sextiles, and even throughout the last year, we've seen sextiles between Pluto and Neptune. I think we're going to have more disclosure, and we're going to find out more where certain churches and spiritual groups are basically being controlled or manipulated by the government, being told, you're not going to be able to qualify for certain tax exemptions. We're not going to continue to support you unless you're pushing a specific agenda and you're telling people what to say or what to do. We may start to see more disclosure about some of that. We're going to see more scams also in regards to organized religion, and where some proceeds are not ultimately being used for nonprofit. They're being taken or they're being utilized for other things. We'll see exposure also of where there's abuse that's going on within churches and organized religions. And we're definitely going to see, unfortunately, a rise in scams and also in issues with, I think, cults. It's hard not to, with Saturn and Neptune both being in the same sign. Some people might turn blindly to faith. Other people might realize that the faith that they've been participating in for a very long period of time ultimately is actually turning them away from others, that it's not leading them towards the path of togetherness and oneness and support and love, that they're encouraging others to discriminate, they're encouraging others to also like rally against, and we may see more religious conflict and more religious wars, unfortunately, as a result of this. But I also feel that towards the end of this cycle, remember Saturn and Neptune being in these last degrees, there's going to probably be a grand illusion that is revealed. Part of me wonders, like, are we finally going to find out what's in the Vatican? You know, are we finally going to find out that they've known that aliens are out there, that they know that our origins are not necessarily from Adam and Eve per se, that really evolution is not quite how I think we've been told it played out, and that there could have been some divine intervention or divine assistance in the process of us kind of coming to this point in time where humans are as capable and conscious as they appear to be. And will this be like the grand awakening, right? Because we've seen throughout time with some of these Saturn transits, huge movements where religious and spiritual groups end up forming and they end up practicing. Some are going to be in the light and some are going to be in private. So I'm hoping that the Saturn-Neptune conjunction will dissolve whatever is not in alignment. And eventually that humankind will move in the direction, especially as Saturn and Neptune move into Aries, it'll be making positive aspects to Pluto and Aquarius. We get back to worshiping the elements. We get back to worshiping deities. We start recognizing natural myth and that, you know, spirit is within us, and not feeling like we have to participate in these martyrism, you know, type religions where, you know, oh, woe is me, I passed for, you know, your sins, or that we should be punished for pleasure, or that we should be punished for doing what is natural, right? So to each their own on that. I'm not gonna lecture you guys, but of course I would love to see a return to the pagan holidays, just me personally. But I have Saturn and Neptune conjunct. So, all right. So if you guys haven't already seen my new moon in Pisces video, check it out. I put it out early because that new moon is going to be at 1 degree of Pisces. It is conjunct Saturn. It's setting the stage for intentions that you're going to be working on committing to this entire next year. So it's very, very, very potent with the opportunity to kind of help you guys lay the groundwork for that. In closing, I do want to take you guys through the 12 signs and just briefly tell you, hey, Saturn's going into this part of your chart. Be mindful of this. This is what you're working on. I will be doing another video more in depth, probably for the horoscopes. So you guys are going to hear more about this through the horoscopes, what you're going to be expecting. But we've got 2.5 years of Saturn in Pisces, and I want to save the meat of this for my Saturn in Pisces lecture, my boot camp. Okay, so let me change this over to whole sign so you guys can take a look at this for each of the 12 signs. And I laughed so hard the other day. Somebody was like, I got to scroll to the end because if I'm not first, I'm last. And they were referencing them being a Pisces rising. And I was like, you know, Pisces are always last. So yes, if you're not first, you're last. So we're going to start with Pisces and Pisces rising. Because you guys are always waiting all the way through the end. I appreciate you guys so much. So let's go ahead and start with Pisces and Pisces rising first. As always, I'm a Western astrologer, okay? So you want to listen for your Western astrology. Placidus is what I prefer to use, but I'm going to use whole sign because it's going to apply a little bit more clearly for my audience. But we're looking at 0 to 7 degrees of Pisces, so check that out in your chart. And please listen for your rising sign followed by your sun and your moon sign, okay? That in that order. That's what's going to help you the most when you're listening to my predictions. All right. So Pisces rising, what's going on, guys? You got Saturn coming into your sign. This is rather important for you because Saturn is connected traditionally to the 11th house of friendships and goals. It's also connected to your 12th house of your subconscious and your hidden self, and it's coming onto your ascendant. So for starters, pay attention to your body. Okay, Saturn in the first house, you're going to feel aging a little bit more. You're going to notice it a little bit more. You'll notice where there's stiffness, there's aches, there's pains. And yoga can be your best friend, as can some light weightlifting, but so can meditation, so could swimming, right? We want to integrate form, Saturn, and also water or something kind of spiritual. Now, Saturn on the ascendant is also about boundaries. It's about pretty much telling the world, hey, this is my goal. This is what I'm doing. This is my vision. You might feel like you have to go at it alone a little bit. You may also feel like there is a sense of you having to really use your faith as the way to move forward, to kind of really have trust in the process of some of these changes that you're making. It can be changes with you personally. It can be also in terms of your physical habits. It might be a period where you're opting for sobriety. It might be a period where you're just saying, you know what, I only want to be around people who are helping me be the best version of myself. I'm really focused on my goals, even if that means I need to go to back to school, if I need to go and participate in a new spiritual center, if I need to go and start a group, lead a group, you know, the list goes on, okay? And you will be dealing with that really for the better part of the next 3 years. And I will leave it at that. So good luck with that. Let me know how that is going for you. And do set those intentions for that new moon for you, please. We got Aries and Aries rising. What's up, Aries? We've got Saturn that's getting ready to move into your 12th house of Pisces. So a lot of what I was talking about, you're like, yes. Saturn traditionally rules your 10th house of career and your 11th house of goals and friends and institutions. And here comes Saturn moving into your 12th house. For Aries and Aries rising, there can be the sense of you just putting in a lot of time working behind the scenes. And whether this is you saying, okay, now I need a private office, or okay, I'm working with a team, you know, and kind of being the person who's like really manning the ship and directing everybody. You might be working with people from other cultures or other backgrounds or other places. You might be working in spiritual centers or religious centers. There may also be a sense of you really focusing on guiding groups and other people. Foreign travel can come up, as can, you know, teaching or completing higher levels of education or some kind of training. But there can also be this need for reflection, time alone, you know, therapy, meditation, rest, recuperation. At some point throughout this transit, yeah, you might have to go to a hospital. You might decide to go to another country. You might decide that you need to see a therapist or even a psychic to help you with this process. It's all about building on your faith to help navigate life, right? So that's really important. And with Jupiter in your sign right now, I think it's totally possible for you to do. I would just say don't get lost in the process, and be mindful of things that are hidden, because what you don't see can very much be affecting you. And that can be emotions, that can be other people's feelings towards you, that can be intentions, that can be also people at work. So pay attention for all of that stuff, okay? Good luck. For Taurus and Taurus rising, what's going on, guys? You have got Saturn moving into Pisces. So it's going to be moving into your natal 11th house. This deals all with your friends, with your groups, with your goals. And it's about really getting out there and socializing and making friends or starting a group or joining a group, okay? There can be some really interesting characters that can pop up if you are a Taurus rising and you've got Pisces in the 11th house. Spiritual, wild, unusual, kind of bohemian, artistic, creative friends. Saturn traditionally rules your 9th house of foreign places, education, teaching, philosophy, and your 10th house of career. So I wonder, with Saturn moving into your 11th house, are you going to start, you're going to start a group? Are you going to be teaching a group of people? Are you going to focus on going to meditation classes with other people? Are you building a team, right? Something like that can be happening. I like that your energy naturally sextiles your ascendant Taurus. So it's it's sextiling the North Node, and throughout the transit, it will start coming into a sextile also with Uranus and Jupiter. So it's helping you through having familiar people and similar people who can support who you're becoming, right? So you might feel more comfortable being with some of these more kind of strange bohemian people. You might be more focused on your goals, and you realize that you need to kind of build a team in order to kind of see that out. Regardless, one of the big things that I would say is that you have to socialize. You can't hide out, and you have to push yourself a little bit more through these transits to be like, I'm going out to the party. I'm going to go out and meet people. I'm going to socialize. You have to get out of your comfort zone. And if you do that, it's going to help support the person, like I said, who you're becoming. There can be a sense also of just wanting to network more for professional reasons. And this could be people at a distance. This could be people who are, also designers and creatives, or people who are more spiritual. to help you build your vision, right? All right, Taurus, good luck with that. We've got Gemini and Gemini rising. I'm sure you guys are excited for this transit as you see Saturn come into your natal 10th house of career. So this is a big moment for you, Geminis. You know, this is all about really showing up. And I know it's been a little challenging throughout some of these squares. You're going to still feel the pressure here in March. I think I told you that during your new moon video. Saturn is very comfortable in the 10th house. Okay, the 10th and the 11th house, generally, it does much better. So as Saturn goes into the 10th house, you're going to have more responsibility. Maybe it's time for you to launch a business. Maybe it's time for you to become a CEO of your company. Maybe it's time for you to have more responsibility out in the world, right? Saturn is traditionally associated with your 8th and your 9th house. So for Saturn to be connected to the 8th house of change, transformation, and other people's money, and the 9th house, which deals with education, I'm seeing some Gemini risings who have not been working for many years are suddenly like, I have expenses. Now I have to take care of myself. My kids need money. I need to go back to work. So therefore I need to learn a new skill. For others, it's this realization that it's really time to get serious about building your dream job. And for others, it can be a period of realizing that it's time to close that cycle out and you're ready to finally sell a business or retire. It just depends. But there's definitely going to be a need to integrate your vision and your faith in your ability to make the right decision and make a change. So it's a really, really important time to really take a look at what you're doing work-wise. I love a Saturn in the 10th house transit. At the end of that, you're either going to have a stronger sense of responsibility, you're going to have better skills, or you're going to end up having like a really solid career. So it doesn't matter where you're at age-wise. This is a very important time when it comes to your professional life and your public persona. Where I think this is challenging for you is that it's 10 signs away from your sign. So automatically that's going to feel like a Saturn type aspect. It's going to be agitating because you guys want to run around, you want to talk, you're busy, you want to ask questions. There's a sense of not wanting to be held accountable sometimes. And so having Saturn go into the 10th house can be this fear of being put on the spot, or this fear of whether or not you can handle it all. So what I would say is embrace the change, work with that, especially if you're in the field of anything that involves design, spirituality, intuition, working with nonprofits, with hospitals, with private spaces, health, and things like that. You may be surprised just how well you do throughout this transit, okay? Good luck, Gemini. We've got Cancer and Cancer rising, and we're going to be discussing Saturn going into your natal 9th house. So first of all, Pisces is a fellow sister sign. So off the bat, even if there are some challenging aspects to some of these transits, for the most part, it's meant to be rather friendly because you're going to be experiencing trines to either your sun, moon, or your rising. What's interesting is that you have Saturn in a house that's traditionally connected to like a fire element. So it's active, right? 9th house. And it's about life. And Saturn is traditionally the ruler of relationships and also joint resources or anything in regards to entanglement with other people. It's kind of a toss-up. You know, on one hand, you've got Pluto that's leaving your 7th house, and you've got Saturn going into your 9th, which makes me feel like some of you guys are finally clearing the decks with relationship issues. And maybe your philosophy about relationships is very different now. On the other hand, it makes me feel like those of you guys who are stronger in your relationships may find that you're finally getting engaged, getting married. 9th house can be about ceremonies. But if a relationship's not working, it might mean that you're having to seek legal counsel, or that you're really focusing on moving away from your relationship. You're focusing more on your faith, your belief. If you're wanting to apply for a program, let's say you want to go back to school and you want to complete a college degree, this will help you do that. If this is you also wanting to find a guru or a mentor and somebody who can guide you, this will help you do that. If you want to start focusing on getting published, or finding a business manager, or finding somebody who can guide you in traveling to foreign places, this can help you do that. The 9th house is the part of life where it's like everything opens up. So I think that for you, this is about a change in regards to the bigger picture, especially with relationships and how you look at changes in relationships in general. And you're either going to be learning something, or you're going to end up moving more so into the position of being the mentor yourself and possibly considering teaching or publishing. Regardless, I think it's important to really pay attention to what's opening up for you, especially if you're having Saturn that's trining your ascendant. because it's about opening up and nurturing something that's actually going to be a foundation in your belief system moving forward. All right, so good luck, Cancer. We've got Leo and Leo rising, and we see Pisces getting ready to move into your natal 8th house. So this can be a little bit of a grab bag for you. I guess on one hand, you know, Saturn moving into the 8th house, there will be potentially this feeling of limitation when it comes to others. Saturn can, especially when it comes to relationships and health, really bring up some boundaries maybe that you're needing to have either with a romantic relationship, a friendship, a coworker, and like really needing to hash those boundaries out. Saturn moving into the 8th house, it's very unlikely that at some point you won't deal with some theme of death and release and letting go and regeneration. Now, that doesn't mean you or somebody else has to die per se, but it can be like endings of a relationship. It can be endings of a workspace and you're moving into a new place. It can mean that you get serious about going, okay, I need to get health insurance or life insurance, or I need to talk to my parents about their will. I need to talk to my partner about finally tackling debt, and the emotional effect that that has on you. Now, naturally, Pisces quincunx are in conjunct your sign. So it means that you guys have nothing in common, right? You're fire, they're water, you're fixed in your ways, they're kind of changeable. So it may also represent your response to changes going on with your intimate life or with your joint resources. Taxes, paying off loans, dealing with limitations, and potentially having partners that aren't working or go through periods of grief, which keeps them from being able to produce, can also be a thing. So you may have to step up more. Once again, 8th house is another transit sometimes that I see with Pisces where at some point maybe you may consider talking to a therapist, and that it can actually be really beneficial in helping you work through some of these periods of change. Okay. Good luck, Leo. For Virgo and Virgo rising, we've got Saturn going into Pisces, and it's moving into your 7th house, which is your opposite sign. Some interesting stuff here. So I would say take a good hard look at what's been going on in your life recently. Okay. You've had Mars retrograde in your 10th house. So work's been kind of crazy. There's been squares to Neptune in your 7th, and it's been making aspects to natal planets or your ascendant in Virgo, which means you're like, who's in charge here? Either at work or within your relationships, and things have probably felt a little confusing, right? That's what happens when you have mutable squares. Saturn moving into your 7th house, you're going to see traditional textbook astrology is going to say, well, this might go hand in hand with a divorce or separation or some challenges in relationships. That can be true, but the truth is that if that's kind of what is going to happen, you may already see the writing on the wall with some of these things. Saturn is the ruler traditionally of your 5th house, which deals with taking chances, true love, children, romance, happiness, joy, and fulfillment, and your 6th house, which deals with your daily routine and services. So the truth is that Saturn's connection to your 6th house, yes, if you're feeling like you're having issues in a relationship, especially if you're with a partner who's avoidant and they're not wanting to talk about issues, or if you've got a partner that's potentially going through health issues, or if you have a partner that's dealing with some mental, emotional, or substance abuse issues, those are things that you really need to pay attention to, especially because Neptune is in this house. But I think that it can actually be really positive. Like I've got a few Virgo rising friends in my life, and I'm seeing them like meet really significant people right now. And even though Saturn's not technically in that house yet, I'm anticipating that as Saturn is moving through this part of their chart, and especially when it starts aspecting transiting planets through their 5th, it can be a lot of like, oh my gosh, are we in love? Like, are you the person? Or for existing relationships, it can be things like, where do we grow? Do we talk about having a child? Do we talk about getting married? So it doesn't always have to be negative, but I do think that there is a sense of not just leading with the romance of the 7th house, it's looking at it in a very practical way and being really direct, especially in regards to your goals and your age, and really showing up and doing the hard work necessary in order to make a relationship work. One thing I will say though is that it's not limited to just romantic relationships. Counselors, therapists, finding an astrologer that you work with regularly, right? A business partnership, or just working hard in regards to the services that you're offering other people if you have your own business. That also all falls under the 7th house. And also, especially if you have personal planets in Virgo, keep in mind that Saturn's going to be opposing those planets. So it doesn't matter if it's your sun or your moon or your natal Saturn or your Venus. You need to take into consideration that an opposition is relational. It means that you have to learn how to do both. Virgo can be about crisis and it can be a little pessimistic. Pisces can have a tendency to overlook things and not really pay attention. So there may be a sense of going back and forth about curbing some of those natural tendencies that you have to be dismissive or a perfectionist, and trying to reach somebody who may be a little dreamy and a little bit more whimsical and not totally grounded, right? Good luck, Virgo. For Libra and Libra rising, you have got Saturn going through the sign of Pisces, and it's going to be transiting in your natal 6th house. Saturn has traditional connections to your 4th house of home and family and your 5th house of children. Similar to Leo, this is a sign you share nothing in common with, okay? So you're Venus ruled, you're air, so you're kind of floaty. It's all about being indecisive and what's beautiful and this and that. Saturn moving through your 6th house is literally just work. You know, it's work, it's grinding it out, being really adamant about your schedule, making sure that you're being productive. I think it's going to be about responsibilities around home and also potentially even children. The 6th house is small animals, so it can be responsibility in regards to pets. It can be responsibility in terms of really taking care of your health, in particular mental health in the 6th house for Libra risings, or sobriety, or anything in regards to really being mindful of not having enough boundaries with your schedule and the impact and the effect that it has on you. 6th house is routine. So it's like walking the dog, watering the plants, putting laundry away, making sure that you're eating well, going to the gym. Yes, the 6th house can bring health issues and accidents. Yes, the 6th house can also bring separations, and it can bring divorces and problems with coworkers. But I think that the awareness of this is everything. It's hard for me to imagine that it has nothing to do with potentially protecting more of your joy and your happiness, because Pluto's going into your 5th house. So whether this is kind of saying, I need time to myself away from the kids, or I need to hire an assistant, or we need to hire somebody to come and help take care of kids so I have some peace, that may be ultimately what ends up kind of coming up. And just really pay attention to both physical and mental health. But for the most part, I've seen the Saturn in the 6th house for Libra risings materialize as just focusing on getting work done and being productive and sticking to timelines, and also sobriety. Okay, good luck, Libras. For Scorpio and Scorpio rising, you've got Saturn moving into your 5th house, which is a positive thing. It may not seem like that at first, but this is a sister sign, so it's going to be supporting your sun, moon, or if you're a Scorpio rising, your rising sign. Saturn moving into the 5th house, you know, I'm trying not to be pessimistic because I just came out of a year of this. I'm about to wrap this up. So Saturn's connected to your 3rd house of communication and also the mind, okay? Your kind of daily habits and things that you have a tendency to do. It can be about vehicles, it can be about writing, communication, gadgets. Saturn also rules your 4th house of home and family. And Pluto's coming in there soon. So there's definitely about to be a huge, profound change with your home and your family. Whether that's like a relocation or changes with a parent or possibly buying a house, starting a family. That seems to be a big theme for Scorpio risings. So it doesn't matter if you're young and you're just serious about wanting to buy your first house, or you're serious about wanting to find love, or if you're in a relationship and you have older children. Saturn going into the 5th house will bring the need to practice communication with either children or your family better. There can also be a sense of like reflecting in regards to your inner child and thinking a lot about your childhood and how that's impacted either the way that you love or the way that you show affection, or whether or not you're even open to having your own children. Generally, Saturn going through the 5th house for some of you guys, especially who are looking to get into more serious relationships, will bring about the theme of finding true love, settling down, being happy, and deciding whether or not you want to have a family. You have some interesting aspects because Saturn is going to be sextiling your 7th house, and you've got Uranus and Jupiter going there later this year. So those of you guys who are in relationships, you might feel like relationship progress speeds up exponentially, or if there's problems, those problems speed up exponentially. And Saturn in the 5th house means you have to focus on things that make you happy, and it's also about creativity. So if you're looking to be self-employed, if you're an artist, if you're a designer, if you're a performer, if you're a creative, it's a really important time to make sure that you're making a conscious effort to be focusing on that, especially if you work online, if you have like a YouTube or a blog, or maybe you write music, maybe you are focusing on being able to like tell a story. That's the other way that I can look at it. Regardless, making time for what makes you happy, and also making time for romance. Saturn in the 5th house can be a bit of a drag in the romantic department. You have to actually plan dates, and you have to do things to be able to enhance your relationship so things don't become stagnant. Okay? Good luck, Scorpio. For Sagittarius and Sagittarius rising, you have got Saturn moving into your 4th house. And you are a part of my mutable crew. So the first eight degrees or so of all the mutables, they're not going to get a break. And this is a really significant part of your chart, because similar to Pisces and Virgo, this is going to be moving through cardinal houses, angular houses, I should say. They're mutable signs, but they're angular houses, which means they're going to be active. Now, the positive is whatever you're working through, it's going to be private, okay? Because it's going through the bottom part of your chart. So Saturn, which rules your self-esteem, security, and your spending power, as well as communication, movement, contracts, and siblings, is moving into your 4th house. What does this mean? Well, you're going to be dealing with home and family matters, okay? I'm seeing a lot of Sag risings that are having plumbing issues. So just a heads up, watch for plumbing issues, problems with pools, issues also with bathrooms and pipes and stuff. But as Saturn moves through here, if you have any of those things, if you have those issues, it can be happening as a result of not dealing with repressed emotions and feelings. So the house kind of responds to that, just a heads up. Watch for also like mildew and mold. That can be something else that can come up with this transit. The 4th house, it's the roots, it's the family lineage, it's your mother or father. And it might be dealing with older relatives and the need to communicate with other family members about the care of an older family member. And there might be some back and forth trips and needing to talk to siblings and other family members about this. If you're like, that's not my responsibility, that doesn't apply to me. It could be your responsibility as a landlord. It could be your responsibility also to family and children, especially because you have Jupiter and 5th house eclipses taking place. So some of you guys are realizing we need to buy a home, we need to move, or we're needing to kind of talk to family about helping us with the process of potentially taking care of kids. Or it could be that you're investing more in your home because you're like, I want to own a home. I want to work from home. I want to have more free time. The truth is Saturn, as it goes through the 4th house, it is heavy, especially if it's crossing your IC. So if you look at your chart, if you have anything between 0 and 7 degrees on the IC of Sagittarius, that can, the IC of Pisces, that can be heavier moods. It can literally feel like depression. Saturn is a depressant. So I'm just telling you now. But there's this interesting effect that Saturn has when it goes through the most southern part of your chart. As it swings through here, it's opposing your midheaven. So it's going to get you going, what do I want in terms of my career? What is my purpose in regards to life? And some things might feel out of reach. And it's also naturally going to square your ascendant and your descendant. So you will see the effects of where you've been too overly idealistic, or you've been a little bit too free roaming. And it's going to square your 7th house, where it's going to put the pressure on how you're communicating with your partners. The bottom line is, look, Saturn in the 4th house, it wants you to build a firm foundation. So whether you're doing that literally or figuratively, it's really important to get to the bottom of emotions, family karma, and anything that hinders you from being able to feel safe in a home. Okay? Good luck, Sag. For Capricorn and Capricorn rising, you have got Saturn moving into the 3rd house of Pisces. And this is important because Saturn is your chart ruler. Now, because Saturn traditionally rules you and your body, okay, wherever Saturn goes, it's like a little, like a little archetype of you. And Saturn also rules your 2nd house of self-esteem, money, and spending power. So for Saturn to move into the 3rd house, it's about how you're speaking about your resources, how you're speaking about yourself, whether or not you drop a bunch of cash on a new car or on moving. You may limit or kind of scale back a little bit on subscriptions and what you're spending when it comes to traveling, what you're spending in regards to gadgets, or maybe you're like, you know what, I need less screen time. Can it be more difficult talking to siblings or neighbors? Yes. Do you need to really keep an eye on your car and make sure everything's locked and it's safe in the neighborhood? Yes. Because there can be more issues with crime. There can be more issues with things going missing. You can also have a sibling or a relative that's having some mental, emotional issues. That is very possible. But I think Saturn being the ruler of your second house is also about self-esteem and security. So I recommend with Saturn in the third, if you want to journal more, do it. If you want to get out and go for walks, listen to audiobooks. If you want to learn about tarot, meditation, or self-improvement, it's a good time to do it with this transit. You might consider learning a new language. You may also consider getting on a new platform. So if you've been thinking about launching a blog or a podcast or anything like that, even a YouTube channel, this can be a wonderful time to do that and kind of share your perspective with the world. When Saturn went through Sagittarius, when it went through my third house, that's when I started my YouTube. Okay, so I ended up doing it briefly, and then I came back to it when Saturn started sextiling, the point where I actually launched it. So if that's any connection for you guys, it can literally lay the foundation of you starting something. Okay, good luck, Capricorn. And now we've got Aquarius and Aquarius rising. We've got Saturn going into Pisces. It's going to be moving into your natal second house, which deals with money, resources, self-esteem, spending power. And Saturn is the ruler of your chart next to Uranus. But these two are going to be kind of working in unison the next year or two. So I think that's going to be really wonderful. Saturn has connections to your 12th house of like what is subconscious hidden or what is suppressed. Okay, so it's interesting, Capricorn in the 12th house. Usually Aquariuses are kind of like free. They come across as they're very detached and they're kind of like independent and they're very futuristic. But what you don't see behind the scenes is that Cap 12th house, which can be a little bit more refined, traditional, a little bit more serious and a little bit more business minded. So what's interesting is here you have Saturn coming into your second house where, yes, the truth is you may have to tighten the belt a little bit financially. There is a sense of you going, I'm not going to let resources affect the way that I feel about myself or my self-esteem. There may be a sense of needing to be better with budgeting and spending. And I definitely think this is going to be about finally addressing issues that you have about your subconscious fears in regards to your career. It might also mean that it's a time where you're investing more in your belief system, or you're investing more in continuing education, and you're putting more money into yourself for bettering yourself, and there in turn developing new skills, which can help you have more of like a practical sense in the world. I like that Saturn's going to sextile your 4th house because it makes me feel like some of you guys are really thinking about home ownership, investing in land, buying things that are going to bring you more stability. And we're going to see a lot of energy between the 2nd and the 4th house, which means some of you guys are thinking about, okay, I'm investing in gardening, I'm investing in property, I want to kind of live closer to the land, I'm being more conservative with my spending, right? But also just having faith is a solid kind of fallback as you move through some of this stuff. And because Saturn has connections to yourself and your body, like I said, a lot of it is cutting back. So you might say, I'm not eating certain things, I'm not drinking certain things, I'm not, putting value in certain things. Like there can be a sense of having more kind of like a minimalist lifestyle because you're focusing on investing in the things that are going to be really improving your emotional standings out in the world. Lots of change for you, like big time. Between Pluto going into your sign and Saturn going into the 2nd house, you're embarking on a completely different phase where the way that you look at wealth and stability may not be with numbers in a bank account. It's going to be about how you're feeling emotionally and what you're actually investing your energy or your emotions into, okay? So that's it, just briefly taking you guys through the 12 signs. Hopefully that was helpful and gave you a little bit of food for thought on what to be reflecting on during this time. We'll come back and talk about this a little bit more in the horoscopes next month, and also as we start to really see planets get into Pisces with Saturn and we see it do its thing. I'm sure I'll talk about that a lot during the Virgo full moon. Stay tuned. Like I said, I'm going to be putting out on my website. I've got stuff for Saturn and Pisces that I'm working on, and also Jupiter Chiron and Aries. February and March. That's when these things are going to be coming out. Those are going to be private webinars that I'm going to be offering on my website if you guys want to listen for that. And if you have Saturn in Pisces and you know that your Saturn return is coming up, especially within the first 10 degrees, I highly recommend getting a reading, speaking with a qualified astrologer who really understands and can sit down with you and cast a chart, and also cast your Saturn return chart to talk to you about how you're going to be making really big decisions throughout this karmic period that will impact you for the next 30 years. If you guys like my style and you want to book a reading, click the links below. You can go to my website at beyondtheveiledtarot.com. I do offer Saturn consultations as well as full and half-hour readings. Please leave me a comment. Let me know, what do you think about this video? How are you anticipating this might play out? And do you have personal planets that are conjunct, Saturn or Neptune in your chart? Do you have Saturn in Pisces? And have you survived this transit already? And let me know how it impacted you over these last few cycles. I'd love to hear from you guys. Don't forget to give me a thumbs up and like this video, or share it with other people who might benefit from it. Otherwise, I'll see you soon. I'll be back on the channel in just a couple days. You guys take care and enjoy the rest of your week.